the formidable robot.
If you were around during the 2010s, chances are that you stumbled upon or saw an ad for one of those sketchy websites boasting to have a large catalog of supposedly free games, most of which utilized copyrighted characters. Naturally, Mario and countless other Nintendo IPs are frequently subject to this. Even in spite of Nintendo's quick action to squash these sites, it's like decapitating a hydra. 2 more heads will inevitably sprout back. Because of this, those sites back then were regularly used by kids like me for playing 1 or 2 games with our favorite characters sloppily plastered over them to kill some time. Aside from that, these games to my knowledge are not actively sought after once you've gotten a taste of them. After all, a large majority of them were bad, had some kind of complementary malware, or oftentimes both. I was no exception to this. Despite being not so bright as a kid, I had played enough Mario games to piece together that the crap I was playing was exactly that, crap. Now even with that said, there was one game that didn't fit that category, Detective Mario. As the name suggests, Mario takes the mantle of a private investigator and it's your job to help him solve cases throughout the Mushroom Kingdom. As simplistic as that may sound on paper, the game had surprisingly competent gameplay behind it, especially when it came to finding clues, solving puzzles, etc. It was hard yet rewarding to play, which contributed heavily to my fixation on it. So I found myself frequently revisiting it, cracking all the cases, finding secrets, basically trying everything that the game had to offer. And after a while, I managed to 100% complete it, getting all 5 stars on my save file. As accomplished as I felt, especially considering the amount of time that I had fed into Detective Mario, I was also disappointed that there was nothing left for me to do in it and that I would have to move on to something else. Didn't help that the odds of finding a game on one of those sites that could match that level of quality were exponentially low. Before I could start my search though, I remembered something in the game that I had missed. For context, Detective Mario has different open areas that you can point and click through, one of which being Toad Town. Every house there, whether right off the bat or during a later portion of the game, was enterable. You could talk to toads, get cases from them, find Easter eggs, you get the gist. There was one house however that was an exception to this, 314. Anytime I tried to click on the door of that house, all I could do was knock on it. So I kept knocking, and I found that if I did that for long enough, the faint voice of a female toad could occasionally be heard barking at me to get lost or beat it. In retrospect, this could have just been the developer's way of telling me that this house was inaccessible, although 10-year-old me always found it peculiar that every house in this area could be entered in some way except for this one. So I found myself going back there at multiple points in the game, checking if I could go inside 314 after completing certain cases, like with other locked houses. This was not the case, and I never got to see the inside of that house, nor satisfy my curiosity. Now that I beat the entire game though, I thought that I might as well give the house at least one more try. So I took a pipe to Toad Town, followed the street down to 314, and clicked on the door. To my surprise, it opened and the screen faded to black, accompanied by the sound of Mario walking inside. I was ecstatic. I could finally put to rest what had been nagging me in the back of my mind for so long now. Before I could think another thought though, the sound of a flame being lit played, followed by the screen fading back to show a green toad holding a fire flower in one hand with the other tightly clenched, her face full of disdain. She threw a fireball clean at Mario who promptly dodged it. Before he could react further though, the toad grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. I told you again and again, stay away from me, and stay away from my house. Haven't you taken enough? You turned the whole town against me, so what now, huh? Came to finish the job? What are you waiting for then, coward? Try me. Her name was Marion, and boy was she pissed. Tears streamed down her face like a river as she held a fireball close up to Mario's face, nearly scorching him. Before he could fry however, Mario swiftly unlatched Marion's hand from his collar and pushed her gently to the floor. He started talking in gibberish as always, all while Marion stared daggers at him. You have the gall to play dumb with me? After you killed my sister? You slimy. She tried to get back up and lunge at him again, but Mario placed a firm hand on her shoulder, talking some more. Marion harshly moved his hand off however before he could finish. You think you can manipulate me? I saw you take her that night. I'm not stupid. Super Mario. 12:45, May 18th, does that ring a bell, you filth? She spat at Mario's face with gritted teeth, continuing to stare into his soul. Mario calmly wiped the spit away, trying to reason with her. You think your brother's word means anything to me? You think the word of anyone you've got wrapped around that fat finger of yours means anything to me? She stood up, clenching her fists and yelling in his face as a vein protruded from her forehead. Mario began to sweat, stumbling over his incoherent words as he tried to explain further. Once again, Mario was cut off, this time by Marion's chuckling. Oh, what does it matter now? Fine, I'll humor you. She slumped over to a nearby dresser and pulled out a missing flyer, one that she tore the edges off of, only leaving the picture of her sister intact. She carelessly tossed it at Mario's face, who caught it in his hand. Let's say you're telling the truth, bring me her body and whoever impersonated you. If you don't and still come back here, consider that the last mistake you'll ever make. Mario looked down at the picture, then back at Marion, sheepishly nodding his head. She could only grunt in response, still scowling. As Mario turned around and went to the door, Marion said one last thing. Oh, and one more thing. Mario turned around and Marion was close to him, holding up a fireball. If you even think of trying anything funny, I will know. Maybe that sounds like an empty threat to you, but believe me, I will know. Without another word, Marion led Mario out of her house and slammed the door behind him. Needless to say, I was astonished. Whatever I was expecting to see in that house didn't hold a candle to that, not even close. What really was stewing in my mind after that was the drastic change of tone. Despite this game being about Mario pursuing detective work, the darkest it ever got was kidnappings that, as you'd expect, never ended in death or any kind of injury really. Here meanwhile, someone had apparently died and it was my job to find where their carcass was. I tried to rationalize it as Marion being mistaken and that her sister was just being held hostage by someone. Thinking back on those tears though, they said it all. It didn't take long for me to sing a different tune. Not to mention how surprisingly smooth the animation was. While the game had minor animation here and there, it definitely wasn't that professional looking before. Regardless of how dramatic that encounter was, my curiosity wasn't satiated yet. I had to learn more. So I accepted the case. Before I could go clue hunting however, I decided to head back to Mario's house to sleep until morning. Clue hunting in this game was hard enough at times, and searching for minor details at night was tedious to put it lightly. Before I could journey towards Mario's house however, I took notice of something outside of Marion's house. The fence leading to her backyard was subtly cracked open and the lock on it was missing. At the time I waved this off as me misremembering its appearance, especially after how tense that confrontation was. I dismissed it as paranoia and set off. Speaking of which though, I guess you could say that was affecting me in more ways than one. Now that I was alone, clicking through the empty streets of Toad Town, the gravity of the killer that Marion described finally hit me. The idea of a threat like that hiding somewhere in the town with the guise of Mario kinda creeped me out. My imagination was quick to go to work on what he could potentially look like when I inevitably met him. Even though I wasn't gonna see him so soon, I could piece together just fine that Mario would meet him face to face sooner rather than later. When I arrived at his house, I went through the door and the usual animation of Mario taking off his detective uniform and getting into bed played. Instead of cutting to the morning like it should have after Mario dozed off however, it stayed on that black screen. I was confused, although it didn't take me long to notice the faint noises playing in the background. Initially I couldn't make out what they were, until I paid attention. They were the sound effects that play during lockpicking minigames. They cycled for a couple seconds before ending abruptly, followed by the sound that plays when you open windows. After that, I was in the bedroom during the morning. Before I even thought about going back to the town, I checked to see if the window was open or tampered with. Thankfully it wasn't, although I was sure to check the lock as well. Same story. Still not convinced, I went around Mario's house to see if any of his possessions were misplaced or out of order. Negative. With my paranoia under control, at least for the moment, I decided to set back to Toad Town. The moment I went out the front door, I finally got my objective indicator. I was kinda confused as to why I didn't get this earlier. After all, you do have the option to research for cases at night. Either way, the indicator implored me to go to Mushroom Park and question some of the residents on if they had witnessed the incident. Now that was even stranger. Marion never specified the location for her sister's abduction. Why was I only getting that nugget of knowledge now? So many questions that weren't gonna get answered by me just sitting there, so I strolled down to Mushroom Park. When I arrived, there weren't a lot of toads around, just a couple sauntering about. There were enough to question though, so I prompted each one individually. Just my luck, none had any useful information. Matter of fact, only one or two of them were actually around on May 18th, and they didn't even stay past sunset. Stumped, I wandered aimlessly around the park until I noticed a security camera on one of the shop buildings nearby. I groaned, knowing this meant that a security feed minigame was in the cards now. As decent as I was at the game, those always tricked me thanks to how aware you have to be of subtle details. Regardless, I sucked it up and entered the shop, showing the clerk at the counter my badge and asking to see the cameras in the back. He complied and the minigame started, with Mario sitting at a desk and looking at a computer as usual. Like before, there were multiple timestamps I could scroll through with 4 different cameras to inspect. Luckily I already knew the time that the abduction took place at and clicked on 12. After fast forwarding for half a minute, I could see 2 toads walking into view on the second camera, Marion and her sister. While the cameras in the game lacked color, I figured out it was them by Marion's hairstyle. They were holding ice cream cones and chatting it up before sitting down on a nearby bench. I only had to speed up the footage for a couple of seconds before a familiar gloved hand emerged from the darkness and seized Marion's sister from the neck and yanked her out of her seat. She could only let out a brief cry before disappearing with the hand back into the darkness. Mortified, Marion ran off screen and hit a question block. She sprinted back with a fire flower, using it to light her way as she pursued the assailant into the night. I watched for a bit longer, however. Marion never came back. Like before, I was astounded. In case things weren't bleak enough already, this just hammered another nail into the coffin. And once again, the animation was still very smooth, making my viewing of the whole incident all the more uncomfortable. Just to be safe, I checked the other cameras and surfed through the different timestamps, only to find nothing else of note. With the information from the cameras in hand, I pocketed the drives for the video feed in my inventory and left the shop. Next step was to scout out the area that I saw the abduction play out in, something that didn't take particularly long. The used question block was a dead giveaway, helped by the fact that I had seen it there before and pondered why it was empty. So many little details that I had glossed over during various playthroughs were getting roped into all of this. A few yards away from the bench that Marion and her sister sat at was a large metal gate, closed with a chain and padlock. I had also seen this before, although I assumed it was just a background detail since I couldn't interact with it. Now I could, with a prompt hovering above to pick the lock. The lock-picking minigame was dirt easy, especially compared to the loops I had to jump through during prior cases. The gate creaked open, revealing a path through an alleyway that connected to a new area, one that I couldn't get the layout for on my map. It consisted mostly of abandoned or unkempt buildings, a stark contrast to how neat and tidy the rest of Toad Town was. Most of the buildings were unenterable, and the ones that were contained nothing of use, just empty dirty spaces with the occasional hole in the wall or ceiling. After sleuthing around for a while, I reached the final building that I could enter, a department store positioned at the very back of the area. The front offered nothing of the note, but the back area was a different story. The center floorboards had been torn out, revealing uneven dirt underneath that I could interact with. "You need a shovel." A chill ran up my spine. I didn't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out what was underneath that dirt. I considered clicking off the tab at that point. Did I really want to see what came next? Despite how out of sync everything was up to this point, I never saw anything graphic. This, however, was a completely different ball game, and honestly, I didn't think I could stomach seeing whatever was beneath that dirt, especially at my current age. And yet, despite every rational thought telling me to stop, curiosity had its claws on me, like when Rudy had his claws on Buck. I had to see this to its very end no matter what I saw. Did I really had to put that shit in? I went around the rest of the department store and checked some corners of the area that I hadn't before. To my lack of surprise, no shovel in sight. So I backtracked to the park and headed towards the left side where I had previously seen a landscaping shed during some of my prior visits. It was still there, with a toad wearing a sun hat next to it tending to the shrubbery. I asked him if he could unlock the shed and let me borrow a shovel. The great Super Mario wants me to lend him one of my tools, eh? He let out a brief belly laugh. For 20 coins, sure. He wore a shit-eating grin and held his hand out. Just my luck, an asshole toad. I coughed up the 20 coins and he took the keyring from his belt, opening the shed. Pleasure doing business with you. He chuckled. I could only roll my eyes and put the shovel in my inventory. By the time I ventured back towards the department store, the sun had already begun to set. That definitely was faster than a normal day cycle, as if the game knew what I was about to do. Anticipation gripped my heart the closer and closer I grew to the store, until eventually I was back where I started. There was nothing left to do but do it, so with a deep breath, I clicked on the dirt and the screen faded to black. Mario could be heard digging for at least a couple seconds, not making a sound the entire time. When he finished digging, he dropped the shovel to the ground with a loud clang, still not saying a word. The screen faded back, revealing that the camera had changed to his point of view as he looked down at the hole he dug. Marion's sister was there all right, brutalized. One of her eyes was bulging and slightly rolled back, while the other had been violently yanked out, leaving a small vacant black pit. 2 stab wounds were present on her body, one to the neck and the other to the abdomen. They were surprisingly clean stabs too, done with almost surgical precision. The worst part is that she had been crying, you could see it on her face. Because those stabs wouldn't be enough to kill her instantly, all that blood in her makeshift grave only led me in one direction. To top it all off, the image was caked in this oversaturated orange that made it all even worse. I thought I was gonna be sick looking at that, like I was gonna shield my eyes or close out of the computer, but no. I felt sad looking at her. This girl clearly meant a lot to Marion, her dialogue in that earlier scene was proof of that. And now here she was, dead at Mario's feet, far too late to do anything for her. I knew that this was just a video game, hell that none of these events even happened in the official games that this one was based on. And yet, me being so emotional as a kid, I honest to God almost cried for this poor mushroom lady and her sister. I didn't want to look at it anymore, I tried to click away. Nothing worked though, I was just locked on that screen, unable to make that disgusting image go away. Didn't take me long to realize that I needed to click on the corpse. So after some hesitation, I flung my mouse cursor over and clicked it. Without a second more, a cutscene initiated. It was from the perspective of the assailant who threw Marion's sister into the back room. There was no audio, just a low barely audible ringing sound playing on loop in the background. She rolled over on her back and looked up at the man, fear spreading on her face. She was saying something with tears in her eyes, potentially pleading for her life. It did her no good sadly. The man pulled something off of his belt, a switchblade which he snapped into place. She started to scream, which like everything else was very much audible. I even had to cover my ears and turn down the volume briefly because of how loud it was. The man lunged at her, however the camera and thankfully the shrieking cut away before I could see what he was about to do to that poor woman. I was damn near shaking at that point, I just wanted this to be over, yet it still wasn't. When I was put back in control, thankfully no longer staring at the corpse, an objective indicator popped up. Call Luigi. I was confused, but I did exactly that. brought up the phone and dialed his number. He picked up almost instantly, asking what was going on. Without my control, Mario texted him what I could only assume to be the coordinates for the department store. Confused, Luigi kept asking why until Mario abruptly hung up and put the phone away. It was dark outside now and rain started to fall, leaving me in that dark derelict back room with a corpse beneath me. All I could do was think now, why did I have to call him? Anytime I found a kidnapping victim in this game, I would call in an ambulance to have them taken care of. Wouldn't that be the scenario here? In any case, I hoped that upon Luigi's arrival that we could figure out together who did this, lock them up, and throw away the key. I guess my rush of emotions blinded me to all the numerous red flags waving in my face. Luigi arrived a couple seconds later, calling out for Mario in the alleyway. I rushed outside. Luigi was standing a few feet away holding a flashlight and umbrella. It was pouring out, with the ground completely soaked. Luigi asked Mario what was wrong, no response. The two were just in deafening silence among the downpour.
Mario!
Luigi said, with an actual voice line as opposed to just a text box, the first instance of voice acting in this whole game. Without a second more of hesitation, Mario pulled that same switchblade out of his pocket and charged at Luigi, stabbing him multiple times in the neck and chest. He tried to resist, he pleaded with Mario, begged for him to stop, screamed as loud as he could. His brother never let up however, and nobody came to his rescue. I looked away from the computer screen and turned down the volume some more, unable to handle Luigi's desperate cries and the sounds of his flesh ripping. It ended almost as soon as it began. Luigi laid limp on the ground, wheezing softly as he gurgled on the blood that had flooded his throat. Mario calmly put the switchblade back into his pocket and grabbed Luigi, chucking him into a nearby dumpster. He was still very much alive, just not for much longer. Another objective indicator popped up. Go home. Still shaking like a leaf, I found the nearest warp pipe and took it back to Mario's house, praying that this would end soon. Mario walked inside, closing the door behind him. I couldn't control him anymore. He went into the kitchen. He opened his bag and took out the drives for the video feed, cramming them into the microwave and setting the timer as high as it could go. He left the bag in the kitchen and walked down the hallway. I could faintly hear the drives short circuit in the background. He approached the bathroom door however, before he could take a step inside, he heard something from the bedroom. He peeked past the door and took notice of a closet in the bedroom that had its doors creaked open, alongside a chair on its side lying on the floor. When he approached it, I could hear faint groaning come from inside the closet. He closed the doors and pushed the chair back up against them. After that, he walked into the bathroom and started to calmly wash the blood off of himself, giving me a good look at him via the mirror. That wasn't Mario.